to Six Figure Coaches with Luke Charlton, where every week we interview a successful coach and break down their business. We take you behind the scenes in their marketing, advertising, and sales campaigns. We show you what's working. We show you their frameworks, their proven strategies, so you can implement them in your business to grow. Now let's bring on this week's guest. Here is your host, Luke Charlton. Hey, this is Luke Charlton here, and welcome back to another episode of the Six Figure Coaches Show. Very excited to have you here. I've got another amazing guest for you today. It's actually a client of mine, a very, very successful coach. Super excited to bring her on in just a moment. And actually, she's what I like about what she's doing, which we will dive into. She's got a very unique strategy to get high-paying clients, very, very high-paying clients. I won't mention the price point of her program, but she has clients investing a lot of money with her coaching, and the way that she does it is with some organic stuff. And I know coaches love organic strategies, so we'll talk about that in just a second. Now, before I bring her on, what I wanted to let you know is that if you want to be interviewed on the Six Figure Coaches Show with myself, if you are a successful coach and you want to be promoted to my community, to be celebrated and promoted, then all you have to do is go to podcast.lukecharlton.com. Just go to podcast.lukecharlton.com. You'll be able to go through the process there and come on and get interviewed. Very, very simple. So just go to podcast.lukecharlton.com and you can be on the show. So with that being said, let me bring on today's guest. As I mentioned, she is a client. Her name is Amanda Karlstad, and she's a very successful coach. And the way that she actually, let me start with who she helps. She actually also helps, just like I do. She helps coaches get to 6, 7 figures and beyond. So we have very similar. Basically, this is the exact same market, but the way that we help our clients is a little bit different, and that's what I'm excited to dive into and talk about her business and how she gets clients and how she helps her coaches get clients as well. So with that being said, let me bring on Amanda. Amanda, super excited to have you here on the podcast.
Great to be here, Luke. Thanks so much for having me on.
No problem. And so before we dive into your specific strategies that you use in your business and how you help coaches, so can you just give the coaches listening a little bit of a background as to how you actually got into helping coaches grow their business?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when I started coaching, when I decided to exit my corporate career back in 2016, and I decided to launch my coaching practice, I started coaching, not coaches, but I was coaching clients that were going through career transition. And because that was my story, that was my journey, that's what I had recently gone through, it was really something that I was passionate about, and that I had a lot of resources, a lot of tools that I could really help clients. And through that process, I had more and more coaches that were seeing me grow my business and were seeing the success that I was having. And it just really kind of organically happened where they started reaching out and asking me, how are you doing this? And can you help me grow my business? And so it really unfolded quite organically when I look back at the process. And so before I knew it, I had really a full roster of clients that I was helping build their businesses and enjoyed every moment of it. And really, being the fact that I have grown businesses really my entire career, it was the next natural step for me. So that's how I kind of landed into the work that I do today with my clients.
I did not know that about your backstory. That's cool. Actually, similar. I actually started off as a health coach, and I didn't actually like coaching people around that, losing weight and getting healthy. But I liked it for myself. I found that I didn't like doing it for other people, but I love the marketing and sales kind of thing. So it was quite organic in that transition as well.
Interesting.
So can you just give the coaches listening a little bit of a overview of your business model? Because I know you've got some, you've got some very high-end programs. You've got some kind kind of in the middle range as well.
Mhm.
So just
Mhm.
give an overview of like what are the programs that you deliver, maybe even the length of them, and then we'll go from there.
Sure. Yeah. So I offer two programs. So I work with coaches that are really looking to grow to that first six figures and do
Hmm.
it in the most accelerated way. And then also I have a program for coaches, my high level mastermind, which is for coaches who are looking to scale. So they've already hit that six-figure mark, or they're trending at that six-figure mark.
Hmm.
And the work that we do there is we really help build them up into that multiple six-figure and eventually seven figures and beyond. So two programs. One is a 6-month, my foundational program is my 6-month business accelerator,
Yep.
where I do help clients really lay the foundation for that six-figure growth, for what essentially they need to grow to that level. And I always say this to clients, it's really the foundation that they need
Mm.
into that multiple six and even seven-figure level and beyond. I've had many clients that have started with me in that process that are now literally, making seven figures in their
Yep.
business from that foundation that we build. So
Right.
so that is my 6-month kind of foundational program for coaches under that six-figure mark. And then my high level mastermind is for clients who are at that, six-figure mark or beyond and looking to scale up. And that is
Yep.
a 12-month program. And so in both of those programs, it's, a lot of focus on, yes, there's the strategy, but it's also a lot of the inner work that I talk a lot about, and becoming the leader your business really needs you to be in order to build a business to that level. And so
Yep.
I find that we're always kind of dancing in between both the strategy and also kind of the inner embodiment work that needs to happen in that
Yep.
journey.
Absolutely. Okay, cool. So my next question is, what are those like if we're talking about the coaches under six figures, because that's going to be most of the
Mhm.
coaches listening in,
Yeah.
what are those foundational elements that you take them through in that program?
Yeah. So it really starts, there's really 4 phases that I have in my program. And the
Hmm.
first phase is really all about clarity, because what I find is that when you are kind of under that six-figure mark, and you're starting out, you're launching, you're just trying to kind of figure things out, which is can be a really exciting place to be, but it can also be really frustrating, I think, for a
Mm.
lot of coaches. And so coaches that come to me are generally, they've tried a lot of different strategies. They've tried a lot of different things. I call it throwing spaghetti at the wall.
Yeah, that was me.
And they're kind of at a point where, they're just ready to get it done. They're ready to really step into their next level. And so the first phase is really all about clarity in terms of their market, in terms of who they work with, what they're offering. So we do a lot of work in getting them into full alignment with what it is that they're offering, who they're speaking to, what is their messaging around that,
Yep.
what is going to work best for them in terms of their marketing. And once we have that, then we can kind of go into that next phase, which is really then taking it out into the market. It's really building it, taking it out into the market, and generating clients. So um, yeah, and then from there, it's really about, like, optimizing things. It's really about then moving into, okay, that next level of scale once we get things moving in the business. So I know
So
that's
sorry,
like a high level.
sorry, the clarity was the first one. What was the second
Yeah.
element?
Yeah, so the second element is really then we go into, like, what I call the build phase, where we really
Ah,
start to
okay,
build
sorry.
out different
So still
assets.
on
We start
clarity
to
then. Okay, cool. Yeah.
Yeah, so we start to move into that build phase where we start to build out some of the assets that they're going to need in their business, whether
Yep.
that's, a webinar, or, whatever type of asset we're using to really start marketing their business. Then once we launch that, then we move into that implementation phase where we're launching it, where we're taking them out to market, testing
Mhm.
it, we're iterating, and then from there it's really about scaling after we've
Okay.
moved through that. So there's a lot that happens in that process. And of course, everybody comes in, having different levels of experience and different, is
Mm.
coming in with different scenarios. So the work that I do is highly customized. It's highly personalized. It's really I one of the most important things that I think for a coach to be successful is to really be in alignment with what it is that they're offering, who they're speaking to, and not trying to frankly be something that they're not. I think that can be a big challenge for a lot of coaches. So um
Can
that
you
work we
expand
do
on
in
that,
that initial
Amanda?
phase.
Can you expand
Yeah.
on that? Like not being something that, what did you mean by that?
Yeah, so one of the things that I see happen a lot, and I've done podcasts on this myself. I think in the coaching industry, we have these models, we have these ideas of what we think we should do. And there's a lot of um, strategies, there's a lot of ways that you can build a business in this industry. And what I see happen is a lot of coaches come in and they try to um, replicate what somebody else is doing. They try to model what somebody else is doing and not really
Funnel hack?
understand funnel hack exactly. And what happens is they inevitably will run into, all different types of barriers with that. And when you're not in integrity, I think, with your message, with the work, with if you're trying to again just kind of copy somebody else, and I will say I think there are things that you can learn from others that are doing
Mm,
well in the industry. You want to look at those models and take what works for you, but coming in and trying to replicate somebody else's business is, I think, one of the worst things that you can do.
mm,
So, and I unfortunately I see that happen for a lot of newer coaches who maybe see somebody that is very successful
mm.
and says, okay, well, I'm going to just do what they're doing. The problem with that is that they don't really have all of the background that other
Yeah,
coach has, right?
yeah.
And so that can be a bit of a challenge. And so I'll give you an example. So I recently had a new high level client come to me in the last couple of weeks that they've built a really successful business. They've built it to multiple six figures, but they've hit a wall in their business. They've hit a kind of a plateau in their business because the work that they're doing, it just isn't in full alignment anymore with
Yeah.
what really their expertise is and the highest value that they could actually bring. So we've actually made some pivots. We've changed. They're developing a whole new program. We've already tweaked message. They've rebranded their podcast and they're already seeing massive, like literally within like 4 weeks, they're seeing a ton of movement in terms of more and more clients already resonating, more of those ideal clients resonating with what it is that they're
Okay,
they're
nice.
putting out into the world. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Actually, I
Okay.
literally did a podcast episode about this, like yesterday, I think it was,
Okay.
where a client asked me, so she saw this kind of guru promoting one of his programs, and then in the
Mm,
application process, one of the questions was, um, if this program is a good fit, do you have $2,500 like to put a deposit on it, like today? Basically, was one of the questions.
okay.
And I
Okay.
said, okay, like, he's a big name in the industry. Like he can get away with asking that type of question,
Mm,
but an
yeah.
unknown coach, like, so she sees that and she goes, oh, that'd be a great question. Cause like the logic is, well, if I ask that question on my application, then now I know that they have the money to invest. And now
Yes.
I know that I shouldn't be
Right.
spending an hour with them on the phone. Right. But
Yeah.
with someone that's positioned differently in the market, that has a name or whatever,
Mhm.
different
Mhm.
relationship with the market, and then a coach that's unknown goes to copy stuff like that, it can just not work, and they don't understand why is this
Exactly.
not working or whatever, and it can actually put people off that don't know you if you do that type of thing, like
Yeah.
ask them if they
Absolutely.
have money when they don't even know the value of your program, kind of thing. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's just interesting. I definitely resonate with funnel hacking, or looking at what's working in the market is obviously
Mhm.
important, but like copying them and sometimes like verbatim is something that
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
it doesn't work.
It
Doesn't really
doesn't.
work. Yeah.
It doesn't. And the other thing that I think this comes into play with too is like just business models. Like I see,
Mm,
sometimes coaches will come to me and they have either launched like let's just use a membership, for example, right? Like
mhm,
maybe like a $97 type membership. And they might see, oh yeah, this person that has this multi-million dollar business that's a membership model, which yeah, in theory, it sounds great. But the reality of building, and this, Luke, like building that type of model in this type of environment, it takes, you have to have a huge audience in order
you
for
do,
that to
yeah,
work. Like there has to be, either a huge email list, a huge audience. Like there are elements at play that I think sometimes get lost, and we just see
Mm,
these business models and we think, oh, well, let's, offer this membership, this low cost membership. I'll get tons of people, but it doesn't necessarily work that way.
no.
So
I have an
yeah.
email. I have an email called "Memberships Are the Devil." Why?
Do you
Yeah,
really?
why memberships are the devil? Yeah, because
Interesting. Yeah.
I agree. It's very appealing, right? Because it's like, oh, it's the first of all, the
Hmm.
assumption is because it's lower price, it'll be easier to sell. No, you have to know how to
Right.
write sales pages, right? You're
It
not going to sign them
requires
up overnight.
more. It requires
Yeah,
more skill, I believe,
right. Yeah, it does
to
way more.
to build and
Um,
run a membership. Yeah.
And in terms of the metrics, like with the cost of advertising, which you just mentioned or
Hmm.
alluded to it, the cost of
Yeah.
ads to make that work, you really have to be at a level where you're okay with cash flow going out for maybe 3 months before it starts to
Right.
come back in, right? Because like I have a client that I run ads for, and we sell. Again, we're running ads from the ad straight to a membership. It's a weight loss membership. Now
Okay.
I've taken their program from 1,500 members to 5,000 recurring, but we
Mm-hmm.
actually lose money on the front end. So it's a
Yeah.
dollar offer. It's a $1 trial for 28 days. So they have to
Okay.
wait 28 days for that initial payment to come through. And it's only $10,
Yeah.
right? Um,
Okay.
so we're actually losing money up until I think 45 days, and it breaks even,
Mm.
and
Yeah.
then we start to get cash flow in, right? But this company can do that because they're like a multiple seven-figure company.
Right.
They have the cash flow to let that go out. A coach that's listening under six figures can't wait, can't spend
Hmm.
$100 a day on ads and wait
Yeah.
for that to just break even after 30 or 40 days.
Yeah.
And that's if that's if your marketing is good. Like if
Exactly.
with memberships, like most coaches don't know how to write sales pages, so you might be waiting 6 months for that money to break even or whatever.
You're
So
right.
the
Yeah.
model, it's so critical what you're saying, like the model that you choose, just like the
Hmm.
decision of like what's your business model. And
Yeah.
that's why you and I are big proponents of high ticket, right?
Yep.
So
Yeah.
um, smaller amount of clients paying you a lot
Hmm.
more, the numbers just work so much more to your favor and get such a way better
Exactly.
return.
Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure. Yeah, it's
yeah.
really, really important. And I think there's just a lot of uh, conception in the industry, and it's to nobody's fault. I think if you come in as a coach, I mean, I was there where you see all of these different models, and there's so many different programs you can invest in, and it's going to teach you how to,
Mm,
launch and build all of these types of programs. But the reality is I think you have to really understand what goes into those types of models, and you have to be really discerning about, you know, to your point, the choices that you're making in terms of
mm.
who you're working with and what you're offering. And that is really, really important. And I find with my clients, once we get them to that point, once we kind of like lock into that, then it's like we can just go. We can go quick. We can start to
In
really
terms of
build
the
things up
clarity on the
quickly.
market and the offer, is that what you're saying?
Yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
I'm
Yeah.
exactly the same. Like I said it to all my
Yeah.
clients. Um, the setting up like whatever the funnel is, right? Or that part is quite straightforward and formulaic, right?
Yep.
Once we get, it's not really about the funnel. It's about like, what's the market? What's the offer, right? What's the problem?
Hmm.
What's the solution? And when we get
Yeah.
that right and communicate it in the right way, that's 80% of
Right.
your success. And that's done
Absolutely.
without any tech set up or anything like that. Creating lead
Absolutely.
magnets or whatever it is, get that right, and the rest will convert, even if it's kind of an ugly sales page or an ugly opt-in page or whatever. Like it will
Absolutely.
work. I'm not saying that you want an ugly, but you know what I'm saying, like that's the
Yeah.
most
Yeah.
important part. Cool.
Yeah.
um Interesting. So you mentioned that, I've got written it down here, I've got some notes in the second, like after you get clear on your market and your offer, which we just addressed,
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
second part is you building your assets. Now, is there any particular, I know you said that like it's customized for each client, but is there any particular strategy? I mentioned at the beginning, like you do have your own organic strategy,
Yeah.
but is there any particular strategies that you prefer coaches take
Hmm.
to help them once they've got their offer clear to help them market their
Yeah.
business?
I love the webinar model for a lot of coaches. I do think that it can get complicated sometimes,
Mm,
and so I try to really keep it simple. But I do like that model for most of my clients. I think it's when you look at kind of the choices that you have in terms of how you want to market your business, if you're going to use paid ads, and I am a big fan of paid ads. I think paid
Mhm.
ads are really important.
Yep.
I think organic strategies are great and wonderful and can be really effective too. But I like to have a combination of both, and that's something that I definitely teach.
Yep.
But I do like the webinar model for clients that they don't have an asset created. They're kind of starting from scratch. That's usually a good starting point, because what I found is if we can get all of those things really honed in, we can get really clear on all of those things we just talked about. And if we can then create a really valuable asset of that webinar that can be
Mm.
working for them, day in and day out, that has the potential to really help them build their business in a really accelerated way. And we've
Yep.
done that a lot with our clients. The other thing that I will say for some of my clients that has been really successful, and even for myself, is utilizing and leveraging their podcast. So um, not always does a client have a podcast coming into my world, but many times
Mhm.
they do. What I've also found is that most of my clients, if they don't have a podcast in our process, we are part of our strategy for them is to launch a podcast. So
Yep.
I am a big fan of podcasting. I
Mm.
myself have been doing my own podcast for 3 years, and
Yep.
it's been a really important part of my business, my marketing strategy.
Yep.
And I love that for other coaches. It's just such a great way to build that know, like, trust factor, to lead with value, to just really connect, I think, with your audience, and really build a really solid community. And so I definitely teach some strategies around that organically and also paid to help grow that podcast, to help
Mm.
them also use that podcast as a way to generate leads, to convert those
Mm.
listeners into clients. And so um, that is a really fun part of the work that we do as well.
Yeah, one of the things, I mean, because I know, because we work together, that I want to mention about your strategy, because I totally agree. Like, I started my podcast, I think 6 months ago now,
Mm. Hmm.
and I mean, I think you've listened to a few episodes, but I get
Yeah. Yeah.
a lot of people that I speak to on my calls. I can tell the like when they've listened to my
Hmm.
podcast, they're so much warmer. Even if they're like someone that's just read like someone that's come from my list, right? They're warm. But if
Yeah.
they've read my emails and listened to my podcast, there's way more trust there. I can just
Yeah.
tell the difference. And so, yeah, for me too, like the way that I look at a podcast is not so much, the goal is not really to get your podcast to the top of Apple's,
Hmm.
thing, and get in all the, get this like massive Joe Rogan type audience. It's really to warm up your actual kind of already, your email list is a really great example. So
Yeah.
you start with your email list and you just send your email list to your podcast, and they will be your first listeners, and
Hmm.
that will take the relationship to the next level.
Right.
It's something about audio and being able to hear someone's voice, that for me changes the relationship a lot. Like you
I
can,
agree.
like video, it's good, but when you're listening to someone kind of like over and over again, whether it's in the car, they're with you, like washing the dishes or whatever
Hmm.
you're doing, that's the
Hmm.
great thing about audio. You can kind of consume content on the go. Very, very
Yeah.
powerful, that I think is understated. But yeah, it just, when you hear their voice, I don't know, there's something about it. You can get their tonality, you get a feel for who they are, and it,
Right.
as I said, takes a relationship to the next level. So do you find the same thing? I know that you've got, um,
Absolutely.
yeah. So anyway,
Yeah,
yeah.
very much the same. So many I have many clients that come to me through my podcast, that find
Yeah.
me through my podcast, whether that's a search that they did, or it was
Mm.
recommended, or various different ways. And I actually love that. I love
Mm.
when they I can walk into that call, or we can start that conversation, and knowing that they've already listened to my
Mm.
podcast episodes. It just, for me as the coach, what it does, it does build that trust factor. But it also, what I have found is that they have such a deeper sense of what I'm about. They have a deeper
Mm.
sense of my philosophy, of what I believe in, what
Yep.
what it is that I actually do. So I find that I don't have to do as much education a lot of times on that
Yeah.
phone call, which is great. So yeah, I
Your
mean,
conversion rates, at the end of the day, your conversion rates
oh,
go way up.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I love when somebody comes in and says, hey, I've been listening to your podcast. I love that. We can have I think a deeper conversation, a richer
Yeah.
conversation. It actually allows me to serve them, I think, at a higher level when they
Mm-hmm.
have that knowledge, they have that experience coming into our
Yeah.
conversation. So not saying that they have to, but
Right.
it does absolutely help that
Actually, speaking of
conversation.
that, so I signed up a new client yesterday for my agency. She was listening to my podcast,
Mm,
and so I told her, "Here's the done for you package. Here's the price point, and it's not not it's sizable, but it's
yeah,
valuable in terms of what you get in return."
yeah, yeah,
She was just like, "Yep, let's do it." No kind of like, yeah, like to think about it. It was just like, because she'd been listening to my podcast, right? And the
right.
funny thing is, so she came through on my email list and she started reading all this stuff about the Aussie hermit, and she's like, "Oh, this is weird. This is, who is this guy?" And she told
Yeah,
me the story yesterday, and then she goes, "But then I got onto your podcast and I started listening to you, and I kind of got a feel for who you were, and then
yeah.
so the relationship changed just from that." So I have a perfect example of that just yesterday. That thing, exactly
Mm,
this thing happened. So
yeah,
I think the other misconception is that you need a big audience to get good results
right.
to podcast. Now, can you speak to that? Because that's something that
Oh,
I know
yeah,
about your system, that's not
yeah.
actually the case.
No, not at all. In fact, yeah, I mean, that's a lie that you need a large audience. I mean, I was
Yeah,
just a flat out lie. And
yeah,
I mean, my podcast is an example. I think there's, when I look at my clients, there's lots of examples that
mm,
are out there where people can build very successful businesses from a small pool of people. It
mm,
doesn't have to be, millions of downloads. While would that be great? Of course, but like there is a certain point where you actually don't need that volume. In fact, I think you lose some of the intimacy sometimes
mm,
when you go a lot bigger. When you have, those millions of listeners, it in some cases I think that you can we might need to edit this part out. I don't know if this is going to be valuable. What I would say about this, I do think like it kind of gets watered down, is what I really want to say.
yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. That's just
Well,
a
when you
thought that
go
I
to a
have.
broader audience,
Yeah,
you naturally have to kind
you
of
have to, right?
become broader, right? It's
Yeah.
less specific. I don't know, like I experienced that because I used to listen to Russell Brunson's podcast, like right pretty much from the beginning. It's like when he started
Hmm.
it in, I think it was like 2013 or maybe 14 or so.
Okay.
Um, and I listened to it for many years, and then he got like then this like from the journey of like him starting like ClickFunnels and going through all of that,
Yeah. Yeah.
and then he got in like I mean, his audience is just massive
Huge.
now, and I don't
Yeah.
listen to it anymore. Like I don't know if it's his messages got broader, but I felt like I lost that connection as well when he got that massive
Hmm.
audience. I'm not sure what that was,
Yeah. Yeah.
but I think you're right. That you can, it can morph into something that it's not really, as I said, it's not the end goal to be like the next Lewis Howes with your podcast. It's,
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
you're a coach, even if you're under seven figures, it's to take that relationship to the next level. To then
Hmm.
you can still get more, like lots of clients from your podcast. That's obviously the end goal, is to deepen the relationship, and bring in more appointments for you, bring in more clients. But yeah, you don't need a massive audience, I think, is the message here, to be able to do that.
Not at all.
Just one
Not
that's
at
on
all.
point, one that's focused and not kind of
Absolutely.
broad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm thinking of a client that we recently started running some paid traffic. So she had a successful podcast already. And
Mm,
when I say successful, meaning she had clients coming to her already, setting appointments, enrolling in her programs already without even doing paid advertising.
mm,
So really effective from like a content perspective. And what was so amazing is we started just putting a little bit of ad spend, a little bit of oomph into her podcast, and it increased the like her download numbers and the amount of people that were coming
mm,
into her funnel and just engaging with her business and enrolling in her programs. I mean, just by that
yeah.
tweak. made a huge difference for her. And she's, somebody that has a very, very specific niche that isn't talking to millions of people. I mean, we're talking like a couple hundred people a week, literally, right? Like not very many people. And so, yeah, that's just a great example that you don't need to have a large audience in order to be a successful coach, in order to put out a quality podcast that has the ability to really build that trust for your most ideal clients, and to be a great nurturing tool to bring
Yeah,
people into your world,
absolutely.
into your brand. Yeah.
Would you say, like, if a coach wanted to start a podcast, like, what's the best way to like get your first initial listeners to that podcast?
hmm Well, I think there's, definitely organic strategies that I would think there's, number one, I would say, and this was my own experience. I actually worked with a production company who helped with like the whole launch. I actually think there's a ton of value in doing that. Do you have to? No, but I do think the value when you do invest in something like that is you will get that expertise. You will get those kind of more specific strategies
Yeah,
around actual launching. But certainly you want to be promoting it, to your audience. You want to have a strategy behind what is the frequency of that? What does that look like? What are the platforms that we're on?
yeah,
And by the way, all of this I would say is don't do that until you're clear on who you're talking to, until
yeah,
you know
yeah,
what it is that you're offering and you're selling. You've got to have all of those other pieces in place. Um, I think in order for that to be even more successful. But yeah, I mean, there's different strategies that I have learned throughout the years where, you can incentivize people to leave a review. You can, the whole giveaway is a model that you can do. I personally, when I launched mine, I actually gave out a free coaching session. So I
Oh, okay.
incentivize my listeners by, hey, if enjoyed listening to this podcast, hey, I wanted those reviews in the beginning. So go ahead, leave me a review. And then, by doing so, I'm going to enter you into
That's a
winning a
good
free
idea.
coaching session. Yeah.
Yeah,
So there's so many different ways. I mean, I've had clients that have literally, I had a client recently just launch her podcast, which I will say, by the way, this is a great example of the power of this. She launched her podcast just a couple of months ago, and it was within like the first month, maybe 6 weeks of launching her podcast, she actually landed 2 corporate deals over 6 figures for her business
yeah,
because of
wow.
that podcast, because
Yeah,
of the increased visibility that it gave her, because
yeah,
of just the organic strategy that she had promoting the podcast in her network. And so,
yeah, yeah,
I mean, literally within a matter of weeks, that client in particular did a giveaway she gave away, I think it was some Bluetooth earphones,
yeah.
which was kind of a fun thing. I've had a client do like even a Louis Vuitton purse. So you can get really creative. I do think it depends on your personality, depends on your
Yeah,
audience and
yeah.
who you're talking to, like with
Yeah, I don't know
anything,
if I'd do the Louis Vuitton
right?
purse, but I
Yeah.
get you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
me, when I launched, I just, I didn't do anything like that. I probably should have.
Yeah.
I just, I just launched with 10 episodes, right? So make sure
Yeah.
you've got your initial foundation episodes, whatever that is, 5 to
Right.
10 episodes.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
people,
Yeah.
because like what some coaches do is they'll launch with like one episode, but you want,
Yeah, I didn't even hit on that, but like 3, I would say 3 minimum is what you
yeah,
wanna have ready to
yeah,
go when you launch. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's one thing, but I didn't do any bribes or anything. I just said, "Hey, I'm launching a
There
podcast." I just promoted it to my list. I think your email
Yeah.
list, obviously that's low hanging fruit as well, to get people. Now
Right.
I got 2 more questions. So one is,
Okay.
uh, what is the paid ad strategy that you use? Like once that's kind of
Mhm.
launched,
Yeah.
because we spoke about this on another call, you and I, a couple of weeks ago, which I found quite interesting. What's the paid ad strategy that you use to
Yeah.
actually get listeners to a
Yeah.
podcast?
Yeah. So again, assuming you have a podcast, so one of the strategies that works really well, that has worked well for myself and for my clients, has been to really just run a traffic ad to a certain episode or a series of podcast episodes. So I recently had a client that developed a 3-part series, and so what we're going to do is we're going to run an ad campaign to that 3-part series. And So the whole intention behind that is to just grow their visibility. It's to get eyeballs right on their brand. It's not necessarily even to convert people into the program. Now, will that happen? Probably. But we're also not really having that expectation around it. It's really more to build the visibility, to grow the podcast, right? To grow the how many people are listening to that podcast. Now, it goes in part with my other paid strategies that I teach, which is then, if we are doing, let's say, a webinar funnel where we would then go in, building this warm audience around the podcast and then be able to retarget those people into the webinar or whatever type of training masterclass that we have. I just find that that's a really great way to kind of layer your strategy. And then, of course, there's, other types of strategies beyond that too that get a little bit more complicated. But yeah, it's just really about getting more and more listeners onto your show, right? Getting eyeballs onto your podcast. And once they start assuming that you're delivering valuable content, they'll automatically just take the next step. If it makes sense, right? If they feel like it's
offer,
something
right?
that they're interested
in. Important.
Absolutely. If you've got the offer. Yeah. If you've got those other things really, really honed in.
So basically you just like an ad that goes to a page that says, hey, go to his iTunes, his Stitcher, his Spotify kind of thing. Is that how they get to the podcast? Okay, cool.
Yeah. So there's a couple of there's a couple of different ways that you can set it up. And there's a few different ways, but it's a very simple ad to set up. And the great thing about it is, from an ad spend investment, like you can start with a very small you can start with $5 a day with something like that.
Yeah.
You can start small, at a very small level.
Yeah. So the way that I would probably do that is, so I advertise a lead magnet and then I have another funnel, but what I would do is for people that opt in for my lead magnet, I would retarget. So there's people going to my email list, right? I would retarget them to that podcast page. I think would be a good strategy as well. So then you just have it.
Yeah.
Then it's just going to warmer kind of audience.
Absolutely.
And you spend like $5 a day or something, $10 a day. Actually, I'm going to go set that up. I think it's because I like.
if you want me to help, Luke, I will.
Because every week, like I send out an email to promote, okay, here's the last bunch of episodes I've done on the podcast. But sometimes I just get lazy and I just like, I just don't promote it. So, but something like that is just constantly, in their face, right? In terms of if they go onto Facebook. And so I think that's, I will do that. I'm going to do that. All right. Final question.
Okay.
You're standing on the top of a mountain and below you is thousands of coaches, and you can only shout one thing to these coaches at the top of this mountain to help them become more successful. What is that one thing?
Only one? I have so many, but okay. Let me go there. So what I would say is this, like whatever it is that you want to build, whatever you want to create, whatever business, however that business looks, just know that it's possible. Like that really is my mission in my work, is to truly help my clients. I always say, help them become examples of what is possible, whatever that looks like for them. And so, that's what I would say, is that it's possible. Know that it's possible. The key is you can't give up. The key is you have to keep going.
Absolutely.
But truthfully, whatever you want, it's available for you.
Yeah.
That's what I would say.
Wholeheartedly agree. All right, Amanda. So where can the coaches listening go to learn more about you?
Yeah. So I would say my podcast would be a great place to go.
Cool.
It's called the Life Coach Business Podcast. You can find that on all of the major platforms, the Life Coach Business Podcast, or
Good
go to
name,
my
by the way.
website.
Very clear. Very clear. I like that.
That there was intention behind it, right? Or you can go to my website, which is amandakarlstadcoaching.com. I actually have a free private audio series as well that you can download, that you can opt in for, all about scaling your business, which is pretty cool. So I would recommend checking out my podcast and or go to my website, opt in for that, and check out my free podcast, my private series that's only available through my website.
Cool. Thank you. Thanks, Amanda. And also thanks for
Yeah.
coming on, sharing your
Thank
wisdom,
you.
your knowledge, your expertise. It's been a great interview. I knew there'd be a lot of value. So thanks for coming on.
You're so welcome, Luke. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
No worries, no worries. So with that being said, thanks again for tuning in to the Six Figure Coaches show. As I mentioned, if you want to be interviewed just like Amanda, just go to podcast.lukecharlton.com and you can go through that process and we can promote you on our show here. So with that being said, Amanda, thanks again for coming on, and I will see everyone else in the next episode. See you then.